Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair Graham. Senator Schatz, welcome to your new role. I look forward to working with both of you. Secretary Rubio, I am deeply concerned that you have overseen a systemic campaign to dismantle USAID, impound billions of dollars that this committee actually provided, and unilaterally remake the Department of State without the slightest bit of concern that you lack the authority to do that without Congress. It has created chaos, it's caused preventable deaths across the globe, and it has undermined American leadership. As Ranking Member Schatz noted, what you have done is outright illegal, a complete violation of bipartisan appropriation laws, the Impoundment Control Act, and the Anti-Deficiency Act. Within hours of taking office, President Trump halted all foreign aid in flagrant defiance of the law. Now, under your watch, Secretary Rubio, that freeze was implemented with chaos and cruelty. And then you illegally shuttered USAID, placing everyone on leave, halting life-saving work, literally locking people out of the building and out of their devices, even in dangerous corners of our world. You paid people not to work.
She laid out in painstaking detail how, under his leadership, USAID, the agency responsible for delivering foreign aid and development assistance, had been systematically dismantled. According to her, this was not a matter of simple budget cuts or strategic reallocation of resources, but rather an outright defiance of congressional authority. Billions of dollars that had already been approved and appropriated by Congress were frozen without consultation or legal justification. A move she insisted was in direct violation of bipartisan appropriation laws, the Impoundment Control Act, and the Anti-Deficiency Act. She described the decision as one that created chaos across global operations, halting vital programs midstream, cutting off life, saving assistance to some of the world's most vulnerable populations, and abandoning U.S. partners without warning. In her account, this was more than just a bureaucratic blunder. It was a policy choice that led directly to preventable deaths in regions dependent on American humanitarian aid.
Abandoned our partners across the globe and chaotically recalled global staff, putting more than 1,600 Americans who served our country abroad in limbo. And when you shut down the USAID payment system, you even refused to pay for services provided before the illegal freeze. You fought all the way to the Supreme Court, against paying for services U.S. businesses already rendered with funding that Congress already provided. And I know you know, Mr. Secretary, but you lost. And I assume you need the reminder because to this day, you have not made all the payments that are required by our nation's highest court, and as a result, American companies continue to lay off American workers.
She explained that these were not hypothetical projects or incomplete contracts, but services and goods that had been fully delivered, funded through money Congress had already approved. Despite losing in the nation's highest court, the administration still failed to release all the payments, leaving American businesses without the compensation they were owed. This, she argued, had a direct and harmful impact on the U.S. economy as companies were forced to lay off workers due to cash flow shortages caused by the government's inaction. It was not just a matter of bureaucratic inefficiency. It was a breach of trust between the government and its private sector partners, undermining confidence in doing business with federal agencies. Murray's point extended beyond the legal violation to the moral and practical consequences.
And, by the way, you do continue to lose in court, including just yesterday over your move to illegally replace the U.S. Institute of Peace Leadership, and in recent cases over international broadcasting. Now, eventually, Mr. Secretary, you sent Congress notice of your intent to collapse the USAID into state. Only you didn't consult with this committee. That's required by law. It came without justification, also required by law, and it came long after USAID was reduced to rubble. So sadly, disregard for our laws and values, to me, has sort of become a pattern of your tenor, revoking visas when someone writes an op-ed you don't like, or reaching a secret deal to use taxpayer dollars to jail U.S. residents in a notorious foreign prison, no due process, or pointlessly leaving food assistance to rot in storage. Actually, in Dubai, we now have 500 tons of high-energy biscuits that expire in July. They're bought, they're shipped, they're stored, all at taxpayer expense. But you've condemned them to waste, and that is one example of many. Now, another pattern that I'm deeply worried about is transparency. We have pressed you for information. Our staffs have sent you countless emails and briefing requests so we can do our job here. There are hundreds of unanswered requests and no effort to address them. And Mr. Secretary, that's got to change. Even your plan to reorganize the State Department came with no information on the 270 offices you are moving to eliminate, the proposed layoffs, or how USAID would be merged into state. I won't ask you whether impounding billions of dollars is legal. It is not. I won't ask you whether it's efficient to pay people not to work or fire them without determining staffing needs. But, and I won't ask you if cutting 91% of our counter-narcotic and law enforcement programs make us safer, abruptly abandoning agreements with allies makes us stronger, or ceding our global leadership to China makes us more prosperous. Of course not. We know that. And other reforms. I don't think any of us are opposed to any of those considerations. We have been doing that in a bipartisan way for a long time. But that's not actually what Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget proposes. Now, Mr. Secretary, I know you would like to give a 5-minute speech back to me, but I only have a few seconds left, and I do need some information from you. As I said, we have asked and have not gotten. Can you tell me, will you share the text and details with my staff of your agreement with El Salvador and any other similar arrangements, including the funding details that we need to have?
Well, she specifically sought details on an arrangement with El Salvador, where the country's president had agreed to accept 250 gang members, and she wanted the funding breakdown to understand the costs to U.S. taxpayers. Her concern was not only about the policy itself, but also about the administration's refusal to provide documentation that Congress needed to carry out its oversight and budgeting responsibilities. She emphasized that this information was not optional. It was a legal requirement for the Appropriations Committee to have access to agreements, costs, and justifications before making funding decisions.
Well, first, I'd like to respond to your 7-minute speech, which is primarily, I disagree like 99% of it. It's just not true. We've done nothing that's illegal. We've been in over 600 briefings to Congress. We've asked questions. We've answered questions repeatedly. We get hundreds of questions a day. We respond them as quickly as possible. And your characterization of the moves that we made
Mr. Secretary, I would just tell you, we are here because we need the information so that we can write our budget and on a bipartisan.
Well, you'll have the information you need to write a budget.
Okay, so will we get the details on the El Salvador arrangement? Yes or no?
Well, which Salvador arrangement?
Your agreement that you've made with them about.
What agreement? The president of El Salvador agreed to take in 250 gangbangers, and we sent them.
Funding details we have not gotten. We need to see what the costs are.
Well, we haven't funded that. We've provided them law enforcement assistance. I know you just claimed that we cut all this law enforcement assistance. We provided El Salvador and other countries law enforcement assistance. They have the right to spend that money any way they wish. But they did us a big favor. They took 250 dangerous, trained out. We didn't deport any U.S. residents. No U.S. residents were deported.
I'm not going to argue with you on that
point. Well, there's not an argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents, because we didn't. I don't deport anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
I'm giving you the details. The arrangements are we provide law enforcement funding to El Salvador, among other countries. How they choose to spend that money internally is up to them.
No.
But I can tell you.
Can you give me the details on the 200-plus offices you're proposing to
Sure, we've
eliminate?
provided that.
We need that. Can I get your commitment to give us those?
It's part of our reorg.
How about the
Rubio's response was evasive, claiming there was no special funding for the arrangement beyond general law enforcement assistance that El Salvador was free to use as it wished. He argued that the administration had already provided significant briefings and answered countless questions, insisting they had done nothing illegal, but this did little to address her core demand for documented proof. The exchange expanded to the planned elimination of more than 200 offices, part of a larger reorganization effort that would also fold UZ into the State Department. Murray pointed out that the committee had not received the legally required consultation or the justification for such sweeping changes, and she wanted detailed lists of which offices would close, which jobs would be cut, and what impact the changes would have on U.S. operations abroad.
How about the details and justifications of your proposed rescissions from programs you claim are out of alignment with administration priorities? Are we going to get the details of that, funding priorities?
On rescissions and impoundment and things of this nature, that's obviously an OMB function, and I would talk to them about that in regard to what's going to go on with that money. I can tell you the contracts we canceled, and I can list to you the contracts we canceled and the rationale why, because I went through them
You get
myself.
those to us like today? So
The contracts?
Yes, and the funding arrangements that you've made. That's what I'm asking for.
Funding arrangements with who?
For any of the rescissions, for any of the funding, for any of the multiple congressional directives that you have given out so that we as an appropriations committee can make our funding decisions.
Sure, you're going to have all that information
you.
when you
I
put together a
appreciate that.
budget.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.